As I mentioned before, my name is Adrienne Laris, and I am the president of the Mountaintop Historical Society. And I bid you welcome. And tonight we are pleased to present the final program of our 51st season. Thank you so much for joining us. Some of you may not be familiar with the Mountaintop Historical Society, but just a quick overview. We are located in Haines Falls, New York, at the top of the famed Catskill Clove. Our mission is to discover, preserve, interpret, and share the unique history of the Catskill Mountain region. We have a 50-plus acre campus. We are the home of the 1913 Ulster and Delaware train station on the National and State Historic Registries. We have an archive of more than 7,000 artifacts. The Western Trailhead of the Catskill Rail Trail, a section of the Hunter Area Trail Network, starts on our campus and leads to the Catskill Falls viewing platform and all the trails at North-South Lake State Park. Many of our programs follow our signature approach and combine history with hiking. Our programs and hikes for 2025 will be posted to our website, www.mths.org, in the new year. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram year-round for interesting history postings. I'd like to extend a special thank you to our Mountaintop Historical Society members and the Bank of Greene County Foundation, whose support makes it possible for us to fulfill our mission and expand access to historical knowledge. So tonight, in honor of Indigenous History Month, we are pleased to present Evan Pritchard and his program entitled Symphonies in Stone, Finding Harmony and Balance in the Ancient Ceremonial Landscapes of the Catskills. My colleague and fellow board member, Johanna Titus, will introduce Mr. Pritchard shortly, but first, for some Zoom protocols. To avoid the disruption of background noise, everyone is muted and everyone's video is disabled. To ask questions, use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. At the end of the presentation, during the question and answer time, physically raise your hand and when you are recognized, you can mute yourself, or you can use the hand raising option if you see a heart-shaped icon at the bottom of the screen, and we can recognize you. And you can unmute yourself to engage in the discussion at a little bit later time. If you have any difficulty, please send a message via chat and we will try to troubleshoot. Now it is my, and Evan told me to remind people to increase the volume on your own machine, your own computer, your own telephone, however you're watching this, so that you can adequately hear he's going to present a video of some length, and then he will be making comments before and after that, and then taking questions. So now it's my pleasure to introduce Johanna Titus, the chairperson of our program committee. She's responsible for planning our diverse programs and presentations on topics of historical interest. You may know her husband, Robert, and Bob and Johanna have authored several books and many articles on the geology of the Catskills and the Hudson Valley region. They're just published. The Hudson River Schools of Art and its Ice Age Origins is available now from Purple Mountain Press. Johanna, please take it away.
Thank you, Adrienne. Well, welcome, and our presenter tonight is Professor Evan Pritchard, a descendant of the Micmacs, members of the Algonquin Nation. Professor Pritchard is the founder of the Center for Algonquin Culture and has taught Native American history and philosophy at Marist, Vassar, and Pace universities. He is the author of several books, including No Word for Time, The Way of the Algonquin People. Professor Pritchard has led walking tours of Lower Manhattan called Native New York for the Smithsonian Institute. He's also given presentations for most forms of media, including TV, radio, articles for journals and newspapers, and podcasts, in addition to presenting a series of independent lectures online. So thank you, Professor Pritchard, for agreeing to enlighten and educate us about Native peoples tonight. And I'll hand control over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you. I have a few words of context because it's an unusual film that I made using Zoom, by the way. And, you know, when we're talking about the cairns, first of all, cairns is a Celtic word, and it's widely applied to the stone construction or petroforms that we see in our region, and specifically in the Shandaken area. And now, I'm not going to talk about geology because we have people here who know a lot more about geology, but also I'm not going to talk so much about solar angles because this book, by the way, Glenn Kreisberg is here. I don't know if you can see this book, but it's called Spirits in Stone. It's hard to see this in the camera, but this has a lot about the angles of the, you know, celestial angles of some of these cairns and standing stones throughout the region. And I never wrote, of my 60 or 70 books that I've written about Native Americans, I never really wrote about these stones because I felt it was hard to capture the essence of them as I see them. But there's also Curtis Hoffman's book, can never get these focused, but geez, it's harder. It's Stone Prayers by Curtis Hoffman, and very mathematical. But again, it's you know, factual, but it doesn't give you the visual impact of these stones. And furthermore, for those without an Algonquin cultural background or spiritual background, it may be hard to interpret some of these artistic statements. So I feel sure that certain of these cairns are intended to be commemorative artistic sculptures, basically. And so the entire film is dedicated to that one aspect. So I'm not, you know, I'm not unaware of all the other aspects. And I started, you know, in the beginning talking about some of those other things, but over time, I'm trying to think, well, why did they go through the trouble and what are we supposed to feel? And I've spent time just, when I find a new cairn, I just kind of stand there and look at it for about 20 minutes and try to get what the meaning is. And many of them do seem to represent animals, but they're works of art, most of them. And after a while, if you're thinking like an Algonquin, because I believe they're in Algonquin region, and mostly before contact, some of the OSL seems to indicate. So I'm going to show these stones through my personal perspective. This is very subjective, but in fact, it's based on, I think, the bigger picture, we'll say. I have a background in symphonic music too, so they say go with what you know. And so I will try to show you how to feel about these works of art by playing music that has a similar intention in a Western context. And so there'll be people who will question why match up Algonquin constructions with European constructions. But in fact, I've always done comparisons to help people see, because I found that people in America have tend to have a great difficulty understanding Algonquin culture, but have no trouble understanding Asian culture, Indian culture from India, Australians, whatever. Europeans, never a problem. So it's a stab at it, and I think maybe very fun and effective. At very least, I think you'll have a nice time. To show you how I feel when I look at these stones through music. So I'm going to try to play. Well, first of all, I want to say that the region, according to the natives here, called it Wernawangkong, which is the upper region of the Munsee Territory, and specifically Wahkunk region, which is the Saukhill River, and Wahkunk could be interpreted as Peaceful Valley. Some of these stones are still in the process of being dated by OSL methodologies. So I'm going to start in the middle of the film, but introduce Doug Harris, who was a Narragansett Indian, Algonquin, retired deputy tribal historic preservation officer for the Narragansett. He's also a spokesperson for Overlook Mountain Center. And he feels that the teaching of the cairns seems to be one of harmony and balance with nature and with each other. And she's basically said that. And I want to point out that the original name of Pine Hill, which is in that region, is in the Warnawangkong and Shandaken region. Pine Hill's original name was Gawi and Sink, which means a place of harmony and balance. So that's not a caveat, that's a context. So it's always an issue to get a context when you're talking about Algonquin culture versus any other culture. So I hope that worked. So I'm going to try to show this film. So let me know if you can't hear it or any other thing. So here is a picture of Doug Harrison to go right on with the film, and you'll hear music, and it's not in your head. It's actually from the film. So that's Doug Harris. He's still alive. He's had some health problems, but he's very knowledgeable about symphonies in stone, about stone constructions, and available through the Overlook Center. So here's me.
We're not able to see Evan or
Right. You need to share your screen, Evan.
Yeah. Yes. Okay, I got to find that button. Where's the button?
hover down near the bottom. If you hover your mouse cursor down near the bottom of the screen, you should see a share screen icon.
It's a green box with an upward arrow.
And it should be green.
Yeah, it is green. Yeah. Yeah.
I don't see any, unfortunately, I don't see that.
Do you see, what do you see? What do you see at the bottom of the screen when you hover?
Nothing. Nothing.
You may need to slightly reduce the size of the whole image so that there's space at the bottom to be able to have your image.
It's getting lost here. I'm not seeing that.
If you move your mouse and see an arrow, just bring it down towards the bottom. It should.
Okay, I see. Yes, I see share screen.
Okay.
That's good.
You're in business.
Okay.
Thank you, Glenn.
Well, there's still.
Do you have your presentation open on one of the screens?
Do you see it? You see it?
I don't. I'm asking if
see it?
when you go to share screen, it should give you the option of what you want to share, and one of them should be your program.
Well, I just pressed share screen and I can see it. Can you?
No.
I'm not getting. No. Oh God, this is what I'm afraid of.
Jessica, can you help in any way?
Need some help here.
I'm trying to think of a way to help.
I know we rehearsed all this, but it's it's different when.
Well, yeah, this is what I was afraid of.
So when you hit the share screen, when you hit the share screen arrow, what do you see? You click on it.
Just I see the window.
There you go. You got it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. You're there.
Bravo.
Can you see that? Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I don't assume that. So I'm supposed to also see. Oh, here we go. That's what I was waiting for. Okay, so I'm going to do share sound. Oh,
Jesus.
I'm going to try. Tell me if this. Oh, something's wrong again. You can't hear it, right?
No,
Can you hear that?
I hear something faintly, yes.
Oh, yeah, okay. But there should be this 3 dots at the top. Okay, here we go. This should work. Okay, I'm going to try this. It is located in a dramatic overlook. Can you hear it? And interesting, most of them
Yes.
are located between 800 and 1100 feet in altitude, which some recent medical research has shown to be associated with ideal barometric pressure for harmony and balance in the body for the lungs and heart especially. This stone bench is located so as to be an ideal astronomical observatory. The skyline on the opposite side of the valley conforms to the path of the sun, so I believe, in the winter solstice, though I've not seen it work. I believe that the sun would seem to walk along the top of the mountain that day, then down. In Taino, at least, a metaphor for the journey of life itself. If music, its big sky appeal would remind one of the Grand Canyon Suite, specifically The Sunrise by Groffet. In a second. I don't know if you're familiar with Groffet's Grand Canyon Suite, but this is the opening, The Sunrise.
Progress.
Different way of observing the sun. I believe some north-south walls were used in shadow calendars. You plant a stake in the ground to the west of a wall like this and mark the position of the sun's shadow through the year as it's setting. The wall this short would serve no other purpose. If music, the wall might sound like Catskill's canon, slowly measuring off the mark of time while honoring the marriage of Mother Earth and Father Sun. This cairn, certainly an artistic statement about harmony and balance, is a symphony in stone and stands on Overlook Mountain, part of a large cairn field, which includes two effigy snakes depicting the constellation Draco. These photos courtesy of Overlook Mountain Center. So to me, I would say if it had a sound, it would sound like Mozart's 40th Symphony in G minor, but maybe on a smaller scale. And these were used as sometimes as memorials for the dead. So look at this cairn and think about what you know about Mozart's 40th Symphony and how perfect and symmetric. This Manitou marker called the Devil's Tombstone. Well, the plaque honors the highway workers who paved Route 214, but that was just a very clever way of placing the stone under state protection. The graffiti on the stone alone dates back to the early 1800s. In Native New Yorkers, I quoted William Ritchie, New York State archaeologist, supporting the idea that natives had created ceremonial landscapes around 1047 BC, using sites aligned with the grid to the solstices and the equinoxes. One such line identified has become famously known as the Montauk-Hammonasset line, and it leads from a similar upright monolith, similar to this one, in Montauk's Devil's Tombstone, a few miles from Phoenicia up in 214 and beyond the Manitoulin Island in Lake Huron, Ontario. Since then, writers like Dr. Curtis Hoffman and Glenn Kreisberg has written about such alignment. Kreisberg used GPS to map out the Montauk-Hammonasset line. See his book, Spirits in Stone, page 132 to 135. And it seems to align with the uppermost tip of this stone slab. Alf Ebers said it was already there when the first Dutch traders arrived. It is a local stone. Geologically, it was not uncommon for teams of native men to dig a hole and to upright it into a mark gatherings in a hole in the ground. If music, to me, it would be like a national anthem of a country not yet forgotten. And so I believe these had become somewhat gathering places and stones that stirred the patriotic spirit of the Algonquin people of the East. This is also from Glenn Kreisberg. It's a marker of the solstices, reminding us of the big picture and the alignments between all of the cairns and the tombstones along this line would unify the people of this land. This map complements of author Glenn Kreisberg, The black line is associated with the winter solstice sunrise and the summer solstice sunset. The set would be in the west, of course, connecting the tops of the two monoliths I mentioned, 150 miles apart with pinpoint accuracy. This could have been done without an astrolabe by observing the solstices carefully over time, as described in Native New Yorkers, and in between hundreds of petriforms can be found along that corridor. So again, here's a map of the entire Manhattanwack area from the tip of Long Island over to Phoenicia, covering all this territory with these various tribes. The red line across the map shows the path of this Montauk-Hamanescent line going directly to the tip of Manitou Marker, or the Devil's Tombstone, as plotted by GPS. I first wrote about that in 2000, published it in Native New Yorkers in 2002. Although the stone is in a deep clove and cannot be plotted by line of sight, it is still accurately aligned because the line is based on the winter solstice sunrise and summer solstice sunset. Notice the parallel to the New Jersey-New York state line here. They're parallel because everyone in earlier times was quite familiar with the solstice line. Many cairns tend to resemble beehives by respecting the forces of gravity, but this one is rather distinct and also has a hollow place where a grown human could enter into, crouching. It is carefully constructed, as always, without cement and built on bedrock so that it does not slip or crumble over eons of time. And here we see a more mathematical attempt to achieve harmony and balance. This cairn is part of a CSL, or ceremonial stone landscape, that depicts a map of the circumpolar stars as they appeared about 1000 BC. If music, it might be a kirtan or a hymn to Lord Rama, but more appropriately, I think, be compared to Joanne Shenandoah's Path of Beauty. There's a kind of a Mother Earth beauty, a very gracious kind of simple beauty. I call this cairn the Green Fortress. Without knowing its astronomical alignment, it's hard to say how it was used. But it looks to me like a fortress, or maybe even a depiction of an earlier fortress memorialized. If music, it would be a French horn overture, but certainly even better, the finale to Tchaikovsky's 1812 overture would be perfect with all its French horns. Let's gaze at it and imagine such a thing. I call this Chief Beaver, or the beaver with the chief's hat on. You see the beaver in the bottom looking to the right, wearing this very fancy hat, the chief's hat. Notice the reflecting stone. Many cairns have reflecting stones, and they often face the south to reflect the light in the winter. Here it resembles a ceremonial medallion or pin in a ceremonial hat. If it were music, I'd imagine it as a march by Dunn Philip Sousa, perhaps the Thunderer, which commands respect. Imagine perhaps if the timing were different, that this could be a memorial to the great chief Hamakwa. But it might have been an earlier chief that history, white history. This is what Ted Timbrett calls a platform cairn, and I think of it as a podium or an altar for leading ceremony in this forest cathedral. And if it were music, it might be a church hymn. And I thought it would be clever and appropriate to compare it to Rock of Ages. This, to me, is a real work of art. I see it as a giant skull in mourning. The eyes are burdened by the weight of grief and sorrow, and yet we can see the pupils represented by these white reflecting stones. You see there's stones weighting it down with grief in its eyes, its two eyes facing to the right, its nose is here, and there are burdens of grief even on the top and on its back, burdened down by grief and sorrow. Perhaps it was the death of a person's father, and like Pappenheim, when his father died, he had a epiphanal experience. So somebody in that position might have created this to mourn his own father. And it reminds me of the tragic bel canto aria by Puccini, Neo Babino Caro. Look at this. Stir. It's photos from Glenn Kreisberg. I call this the house of Willie Weemock's mother. It's a great monster story. Willie Weemock was like the highwayman of the Muncie, Delaware stories. He was a shape-shifting serpent that could turn into the shape of the most attractive young man. With the beautiful mane of hair and fancy clothes, and very charming, and just sweeping the ladies off their feet. And of course, he was actually this serpent that killed lots of people. And in the story, that he takes the young girl, pretty face, he goes to her house, he talks to her mother, and the mother doesn't like him, but the girl is in love, and so she takes his hand and they walk off, and he takes her to the bottom of a lake and she can breathe under the water, and he takes her to his mother's house, which is like a wigwam in stone. And then she realizes that they're both shape-shifting into serpents as she watches, and she starts to run away, and then she goes back to the shore. He's hit by a lightning bolt, and then she is left there grieving and confused and like, am I married? Am I a widow or what? And then the thunder beings come down and they thank her for luring him into that position. They've been trying to kill him for 1,000 years. Anyway, this cairn, this happens to look like Willie Weemott's mother's house. And so I thought, what songs relate to a dastardly person out on the loose, picking up, stealing from young women. And of course, I thought of the Highwaymen. See right here, this is a reflecting stone, not as shiny as some, but it's sort of like sneaks up on you from the middle like a viola solo. But here is Haydn's Emperor string quartet. Apologize for the subliminal advertising. I couldn't hear it at the time. So there are cairns on Overlook Mountain Center of various kinds. This one, I think about theme and variation, such as by J.S. Bach Goldberg variations, which are complex, but they're built on a firm foundation. And here you see the very prominent reflecting stone, similar to the prominent themes used in the Goldberg variation, but you see a lot of complexity behind it, that it's built on a very firm foundation that Bach actually helped to create himself in music history. Think of the reflecting stone as the theme, and all the other stone is variation. Very delicate. It's also, in a way, a very peaceful cairn, like the opening of the Goldberg variations. This expansive but close to natural cairn or cairn landscape makes me think of a vast impressionist tone poem such as La Mer by Debussy, where the elements of nature are transparently coming through the artwork, So it's hard to say where the natural part ends and the human creation begins. It's the whole impressionistic type of creation to me. So I will now we'll play that music here. So this is a simple one. This is kind of a ruined cairn or an unfinished cairn. And so it's sort of just partly there, and you can imagine what the rest is like, just like Schubert's Unfinished Symphony. So let's listen to that for a moment, which also has the kind of a natural or pastoral aspect to it. So this one seems a little bit cocky to me. It's on an incline, and yet it seems to maintain straightness. It reminds me of a perky, energetic overture like the William Tell overture by Rossini. And so, I'm going to play that and take a look at this, how just like buoyant this cairn is in the context of the environment. And I'm going to play you the version in brass, which brass always is a metal, by the way, and metals come from stone. So here is a version from the movie Brass Off, which is a fine performance, by the way. Just a minute. Usually comes back. begin from the Overlook Mountain Center. This one's very special. Almost all cairns are built on bedrock, so they do not fall over, and so they stand the test of time. The stones on the top are often memorial or prayer stones set in place one by one to honor the deceased by passers-by, and sometimes by one person, I believe, mourning the loss of a loved one. This one is somewhat stately and delicately balanced, as if on a fox fur cap honoring a dancerly young woman. So you see, it's a fox fur cap has that kind of shape, just as the bedrock here does. So I'm just speculating, perhaps there was a fox fur hat that a young woman wore who passed away. And so these memorial stones would be placed on her head in honor. So I would compare it to the Pavane pour un enfant by, or Pavane for a Dead Princess by Maurice Ravel, which was for that same purpose. This is from the Orion Starfield. So if music, this would remind me of a jazz quintet like Giant's Death by John Coltrane, or, but even better, Dave Brubeck's Take 5. It's a very jazzy arrangement. We don't know if it's the complete original setting of the Stones or whether some has been taken away, but as it is, it's kind of artistic in a very 20th century way, seeming to be quite casual, but in fact, very effectively planned, reminding me of Dave Brubeck's Take 5, which really opened up a lot of ears. So look at these stones and how they're jazzily arranged, and listen to this. This composition of stones at the mouth of the cave is very unusual, but they're often in caves and holes in rocks you find layered stones. We don't know maybe what they mean, but it would be like the atmospheric music of Fingal's Cave by Felix Mendelssohn. So let's imagine for a moment that it's like a little symphony, just honoring nature and the ruggedness of the rocks. Okay, this is
The
one of my
fun one.
favorites. In this dramatic stone composition, the reflecting stone is in the crown right here, like an all-seeing eye. And I see this as a monument to the Misingwe, or the little people, who are mainly found in the deep green forest and who see great distances with their inner eyes, protecting the forest, protecting the deer and other animals. They are the game wardens of the Muncie Delaware lore. This one seems like the watchful mother of Summer Girl, who one of the Misingwes in the legends, who brings warm weather with her wherever she goes and wherever she dances. And if music, it could be overture like the Midsummer Night's Dream by Mendelssohn. He's very interested in fairies and little people. And Midsummer Night's Dream is about the time of the year when all the, Puck and the fairies all come out based on Shakespeare. So really, I think this is a very, very powerful cairn. I just see it as relating to these little people. So I'm going to play you some music here by Louis Mendelssohn. You hear them giggling. Hee hee hee. Ah ha ha. Some people would look at this and think of Peer Gynt's Suite Number 2 by Edvard Grieg, which is more famously or equally famously associated with the forces of nature. And so let's listen to that for a different perspective on this same cairn. By the way, that's in the Hall of the Mountain King. How appropriate. This is two photos in these two features. You see the surface has been stripped away, revealing inner workings of the art. It's like musical scales or etudes. The descending wall may represent a serpent, by the way. You can even see its scales. So I thought it reminded me of this. This very powerful cairn at first seems monolithic and perfect, but it is actually built on a makeshift foundation, a totally inappropriate foundation for an actual serious cairn. There's very little bedrock, but there's a big boulder on one side, and the cairn is built around it. And it is a study in maintaining balance amid very trying conditions. So I imagine that the creator who started this, however many people helped him, I don't know, but he must have been thinking he's going to show how he overcame imbalances in his life and brokenness and things, adverse conditions, to create a beautiful and very stable cairn. By the way, that's just a measuring rod against it, placed there by Overlook Mountain, I believe. If music would definitely be symphonic-like, and perhaps Beethoven's Fifth Symphony is the best example, because the Fifth Symphony is about overcoming the blows of cruel fate, but on a smaller scale. And one person on the internet had actually taken the Fifth Symphony and made a lament out of it, more of like a pop song, and more casual perhaps. But I think this cairn matches that even better. So here's Beethoven's Lament. I call this Chichen Itza, as it resembles the iconic carvings from the Yucatan of the great feathered serpent of the Mayans. If it is from 1000 AD, it may have been built by Mayan refugees here in New York, escaping their enemies, the Aztecs. And it has a strong, simple composition, but it's very monster-like. It actually has teeth made of loose stones, like lined up in its mouth that you can't really see. But also you see the long feathered serpent body behind it that really resembles Chichen Itza, Quetzalcoatl, I mean. So the bringer of war from host planets is actually the Darth Vader theme. And so there's one aspect of this which is kind of monstrous and scary to the enemies of the Mayans, but to the Mayans, it's heroic and defending their nation. So first of all, for fun, let's hear it as a scary monster playing Holt's Mars, bringer of war. And of course, Mars had a very different meaning to the Mayans. We won't go there. So here's the heroic side of it, like the Great Gate of Kiev, or Kiev by Mussorgsky, which is not only about a wall, but was based on a painting or drawing in an exhibition. And here we have, a work of art here in this exhibition that is a wall that's heroically defending the Mayans from attack from the Aztecs. You know what I mean. Lots of
Evan, it's Adrian. One or
yes,
two
I thought.
more, and then we can move on to questions. Would
Yeah,
that be-
yeah, I
Yes.
had the same idea.
Okay, great.
I want to end on a very inspirational note here.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Okay, so these 4 cairns, by the way, I compared to the the Brandenburg concertos, which are 6, but these are 4, and it's a really good comparison. But I'm going to move on a little bit because there's I think, a very inspiring part here. I don't know that piece, Doxology of Finlandia by John Sibelius, I think is inspirational. And I want to show you, this part is the head here of the great turtle of Mother Earth, bowed in devotion to her yet greater power. I think it's an incredible That's my interpretation, of course, but I think it's extraordinary. Let me go see what he says. So this is the end of that, and here's Sibelius. This is also a favorite. This is a turtle cairn, without a doubt. And this is a great turtle, again, representing, in many cases, Mother Earth itself. The turtle cairn with its head bowed in a sign of gratitude or submission to the will of the Creator, but also grand, like the doxology in Finlandia called the traditional hymn by Jean Sibelius. And the words are also appropriate for listen to the words. But look at for a moment with this cairn and try to see what the creator or creators saw. You see this head here, the great mighty head, but it's bowed deeply to the Creator. This is the shell in the background representing all of Earth. So I wonder what would the great turtle of the earth bow its head to, his or her head to? It'd have to be the Creator itself, great mystery. So it's very deep and meaningful. And when you listen to the cantus from Sibelius, you'll see it's a pretty good match.
This is my home, the country where my heart is. Here are my hopes, my dreams, my holy shrine. But other hearts in other lands are beating, with hopes and dreams as true and high as mine. My country's skies are bluer than the ocean, and sunlight beams on clover leaf and pine. But other lands have sunlight too, and clover, and skies are everywhere as blue as mine. This is my son, Lord God of all the nations, a song of peace for their land and for mine.
Okay. So that's my film there. I think how to get out of here. So I guess stop sharing.
Okay. Now,
Okay. So
All right.
that's most of the film.
mhm.
There's still plenty left.
Well, it's a fascinating approach that you've taken to look at something that was constructed out of natural materials maybe a millennia ago, and to marry it or to to reflect upon it through 20th 19th century music and European composers. It's been very fascinating. We have a couple of questions, but I was, the one that you referred to is the William Tell one, the cocky one.
The cocky one.
And there was another boulder down the hill that didn't have anything sort of on it. And I was just wondering if there was a relationship between the cocky one and the boulder down the hill that seemed to be about the same size, but that may just have been the angle of the photograph.
Yeah, I think they were the same size, and maybe Glenn can confirm that, but you just take what is left. You not there, we don't know, we can't ask. And so I just felt, I don't know why the other cairn, if it was a cairn, had no stones on it, if somebody had removed them or it was contrast. But to me, what I do is I look at these for a very long time, and I go like to deep intuition and several layers of intuition and try to grasp, what is going on artistically, and then something will come to me, and then I kind of, in terms of choosing the music, I kind of do it through process of elimination. Like, if there's anything that doesn't match, I throw that piece out in my mind because they're all up here. And so I can't answer that question because I try not to. I mean, I know it all seems like presumption and guesswork, but in fact, there's some amount of guesswork I'm not willing to do. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, very good. All right, thank you. Let's see, I'm going to go to the questions now. Bob Titus has asked the question, you used the phrase harmony and balance several times. Can you flesh out what you mean by those three words?
Well, the middle word is and, so I don't have any trouble explaining that. But it has, the and implies connection. And in this film, I'm making connection to things that not everybody would have the background to judge. Because, again, I'm Algonquin and I have a symphonic background. So harmony and balance, that phrase comes directly from Doug Harris. And I was looking for this insight for years and years, looking at cairns, because I looked at 1,000 of them. And I say, what is it trying to tell us? And I was looking for complicated answers. And then Doug said, well, clearly it's about harmony and balance. That much we can, you can see it. That's what they do. And all of a sudden the light bulb went off in my head and said, of course, that's what I've been looking at. That's what I've been trying to find. But I was looking like complicated ideas. Well, of course, there's alignments and there's altitude, whatever that's about, and the bedrock connections and animals. But, and I was probably pretty distracted by the animal connections, which are wonderful, but there's some that aren't. So harmony and balance is really what the stones, show us, whoever made them. And in terms of symphonic composition, that also sums up classical music. Most of it really is about harmony and balance, and harmony in a broadest sense, not just triads, but the complexity of Bach is really about harmony and the expansion on the tonal center. Because you start with the tonal center, which is a singularity, and then you expand it through the 11 other notes. It's still harmony if you do it right. And balance is absolutely essential in terms of composition too. Because, that's the pieces nobody wants to hear are the ones that are totally out of balance, and it can happen, for composers. So that, to me, completes the answer, but people may be looking for more. And I don't know what that more would be, but, if there's an additional question, maybe we can ponder that, because it's the essential question. And by the way, I thought as I was mixing this live from Zoom, which is not a film program, I thought I was fading out, I was fading each individual entrance, and none of it showed up on the recording. So I apologize for some of the abrupt cutoffs, because I couldn't hear those. I was turning them off and on. And I thought, this is the most artistic thing with all these faded entries. None of it came out, so it didn't sound like I heard it that way. So that wasn't exactly harmonious and balanced. But if there's an additional question, be happy to play with it.
Hey, Evan, this is Glenn. Do you mind if I take a stab at it?
Sure.
Because I work a lot with Doug Harris as well from the Narragansett, and Doug is, he always said, let the landscape speak. And the stones do have a story. And when he talked about balance and harmony, he meant balance and harmony between humans and nature, balance and harmony between human beings, one to another, but also, how do you attain balance? Think about it in a practical sense. If you're standing there, standing upright, and you start leaning too far to the right, slowly leaning more further right, eventually you're going to fall over. Or if you lean too far to the left, you get to the point where you're going to tip. You're going to lose your balance and fall on your face, perhaps, if you're leaning forward or leaning back. So it's finding a place where you're centered, is how Doug would explain it. Because if you're too far extreme to one side or the other, you're out of balance. And without balance, you can't have harmony. And those are pretty much Doug's words. And I thought I'd share them. And further, I love what Evan's done, because it's so subjective with the sounds. I mean, you could put, somebody else could put classic rock, hard rock to some of those, and think it appropriate because of the connection to rock. But of course that's coincidental. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but it is art. I mean, these are very, like each piece of music that Evan chose, each one of these constructions is evocative and in some ways irreverent, because it flies in the face of science and archaeology. So, it kind of checks those boxes when it comes to art. So putting them to classical music is wonderful. So I just wanted to weigh in, share those thoughts. Thank you. Thanks, Evan.
Thanks, Glenn. That's very appropriate and insightful. And yes, it could be all set to rock and roll, and that'd be fun too. For me, a lot of these symphonic pieces, these particular pieces that I connected are favorites of mine, but also, again, through this process of elimination, looking at the stones and looking at pictures of them and just tossing out, 100 favorite pieces for the one that fits for more than one reason. You'll notice that each piece fits or matches for several reasons, and that was part of my criteria. But it is subjective, and I'm saying right up front, very subjective. And in the beginning of the film, I did mention that about a harmony between humans and nature and each other. And so thanks for bringing that back, because some people may have forgotten. So that's great. Any other questions? Because again, harmony and balance is something that we need to cultivate right now, right? I mean, people, if you follow the opinion makers, a lot of people are saying that we're losing harmony and balance. And so we can go back to these stones now that we understand the musical aspect of them. We can maybe look at them and absorb that harmony and balance just by the visual contact. Like when children learn a lot by looking at parents who are doing good things and not understand, but watching their movements and absorbing what it looks like. The same thing in sports. You can learn a lot by watching a good player. And so I feel like, and I think Doug would totally agree with this, by looking at these stones and their composition, you would absorb some of that balance. I think that's a big part of it. So, any questions could be fun. There's a lot of fun questions we could ask.
There is one more.
Serious ones too.
Colleen asks, so when I come across rock mounds in the Catskill Mountains, like we have seen this evening, I can say it's a cairn. She's not sure of the spelling. Or is it just, or is it just a pile of rocks?
Right. I use that there's a film that Ted Timrick made with me as the on-screen narrator, looking at cairns, by the way, and he's a great filmmaker. And with a couple $1,000, this film should be done over with actual cameras and actual film equipment, probably $3,000 or so. Make it happen. We need a filmmaker with a lot of dedication, but a good film could be made with real fade outs and, you know, permits for things. It would be fabulous. But Ted Timrick is a real filmmaker, and we did that. And I said that in the film, and we showed the great turtle of Rhinebeck. And when you first look at it on the film, it's like, well, is this a pile of rocks? Just a pile of rocks by the side of the trail? Doesn't it look like a pile of rocks? And so, yeah, it looks like a pile of rocks. And then we go for a half hour explaining like 20 different reasons why it's a cairn. And the problem is each one's different. Every cairn is different. And they all have, you know, again, through my eyes and the eyes of people who have studied them, you know, it's like everyone's a totally original thing. And I like to say it's like Beethoven's 10th Symphony, is that you look at it and say, oh, you know, okay, this is a cairn. Somebody created art here. And how do you know? Well, it's kind of like Beethoven's 10th Symphony, is that if you heard the other 9 and then you heard the 10th one, but you'd know it and you would have no doubt. Well, it turns out there really is a Beethoven's 10th Symphony that he never finished in E flat. They found in a drawer. And the minute you hear it, you say, that's Beethoven, you know, and you can almost tell when he wrote it, because he actually wrote it, and, you know, in an earlier time in his life, and he didn't finish it. So Beethoven's 10th. So it's hard to explain. You look at a lot of cairns and then you really think about it. I think over time you get the picture. Especially, I think this film will get people an eye for what's a cairn and what's not a cairn. So if it has cement, it's not a cairn, first of all. And second of all, if the stones aren't fitted together, then it means it's either somebody knocked it over, or a tree fell on it that's no longer in existence, or it's not a cairn. But we should revere these stone piles just in case they are cairns. That's another point of view. Any stone pile, you should say, wait, before I knock it over, it might be a cairn. And one of the things too is that I've been studying about the Moai and the Rapa Nui people of Easter Island, and they create what are obviously sculptures of people to commemorate the dead, but also the spirits of the land keepers are invited to come into these to continue to watch over the land, even though there's not like a thing inside the moa, as far as we know. That spirit is shamanically placed in them to watch over the land, and I believe that these cairns serve the same purpose. That there's not bodies or anything buried under there, a treasure, but a spirit is placed in there to watch over the land. That's my opinion. I can't prove. So be careful.
Very, very nice. Well, Colleen is pleased with your comments, so she added, she adds her thanks for that. If anybody would like to unmute themselves and ask a direct question, please feel free to do that. I think you can. Right. No more questions.
No, go ahead. I'm kidding.
Right. Yes, because we're getting
Unmute
down.
yourselves.
It's now 8:30 and people are dropping off, so we don't want to.
Yeah. I have
Well, I've unmuted the stones.
Yes.
Go over,
very
Robert.
much.
yeah, I have one question. Each of these cairns, I understand that the indigenous people here, the Native Americans or whatever you'd like to call them, undoubtedly left marks, left things that were there. Have you ever found cairns that have other signs that you can associate with indigenous people? Something that was found there with them, or some other sign that would indicate that there's a correlation between other objects that you found nearby and the cairn itself.
Well, I can't really answer that. I mean, personally, my personal experience, I haven't, but Glenn has, I believe. Glenn, did you find a metallic object once?
Well, not that would necessarily indicate that it was Native American in origin. Anything metallic would be from the colonial or early American era. And Robert makes a good point, and it's one of the reasons why the stone cairns are not given the they're kind of considered dime a dozen early American colonial, not indigenous, by the authorities, because there are not a lot of artifacts that are associated with them directly. And if they were in fact ceremonial sites, you wouldn't expect to find a lot of artifacts associated with them. Those artifacts are found in habitation zones, and they didn't habitate where they had ceremony. They were two separate locations. So not a lot of artifacts are identified associated with these. Alf Evers absolutely found many, many artifacts in Lewis Hollow, in the creek, adjacent to where these mounds are. So in that sense, you could say yes, some were. But inside the cairns themselves, beneath them, not a lot of records of artifacts being recovered or identified.
Well, it would
Now, there's
certainly be,
also,
it would certainly be
okay.
expected, I would think, that people didn't live here for millennia and not leave marks, even in the Catskills. I mean, they're all over the place in the West, in the South. There are mounds that were built that are clearly associated with indigenous people. It would be nice to see some, if there were some evidence
Let's put it.
other than the cairns themselves, that would be
Let me
interesting.
let me just add one more thing, because in the Lewis Hollow is one of the most researched ceremonial landscapes in our region, and I can say that within a half a mile of Lewis Hollow and the ceremonial site that's there is a rock shelter that has been excavated in the 20th century that produced many artifacts that are up to 5,000 years old. Now, it's subjective whether you associate them with the cairns themselves, because it's a half a mile away from the rock shelter to where the cairns are. But I don't think you can dismiss it. But you're right; it would be great if we could find artifacts right there, in situation with the cairns.
Right, and I don't doubt that there are and many of these very likely are, but it would just be interesting to see if you could find additional evidence that they were done 1,000 years ago or however long ago.
Well, let me interject here. There's a whole separate category of phenomenon of dirt mounds, and we do have dirt mounds in our region, but they're not well known, and they tend to be, kept secret, basically. And for example, I'm thinking of the one down in Newburgh Bay that the Oxford archaeologists came over just to dig into this mound, the dirt mound, and over there in, I can't remember the name of the bay, but and he dug down, and they found all the usual artifacts and with his whole crew. And then he said, well, let's keep digging. And they came across some fairly sterile soil. And he said, let's keep digging further. And they kept digging down, and they found a jaguar statue that had been left from people of the Ni-Taino, the pre-Taino culture, right there in Newburgh, and there are photographs of this fairly small, statue of a jaguar, but again, to be traced back to, jaguars never live above the Rio Grande to any extent. Obviously, traders came up along the Atlantic trade current, so you can figure that one out, and traded with the Mohican, apparently. So there are mounds in Maine, there are mounds in New Brunswick, and the same exact story. And I'll tell my Micmac story is that a bunch of archaeologists came to our elders and said, you got any mounds? And they said, yeah, we do. We want to see it. They said, yeah. So they brought him into the middle of the woods, in a very remote area with all those trees. And he pointed to the ground. He said, there's your mound. He said, well, I don't see a mound. It looks flat. He said, well, of course, it's been covered over. It's over 3,000 years old. So the soil built up and it's still there underneath the ground. you can imagine a mound in the ground. So they said, go ahead and dig. And so they excavated, and sure enough, there was a mound under the ground, and they were incredibly old and very, I think, precious artifacts. And now there's a museum that holds those artifacts. I'm sorry about my camera. Maybe Great Spirit doesn't want me to tell you the story. But there's a lot of mounds. There's a lot of mounds that are dirt mounds, and they're connected culturally to the ones in Ohio and the, and places out there. But this is a totally different kind of mound. These are stone mounds. They seem to be consistently devoid of, artifacts. And perhaps one theory is that they were all sites of bundle burials where, and it sounds strange to some people today, but they took the bones back. They dug them up and then took them somewhere else. And so there would be nothing there. They'd take everything and then maybe mark that site with the stones. Another story is that when elders would hold a gathering, they'd ask everyone to bring one stone and to pile it up. I don't think that's the case here, because in these particular cairns, obviously somebody took some personal creative impetus to make them, but it might be interrelated with the gathering stones, or what they call passport stones. And there's also colonial witnesses who actually have seen Native Americans piling stones as a memorial for the dead. And so that's part of what I'm seeing here. The combination of memorial stones combined with an artistic impulse to leave something of an artistic statement.
Yeah,
we don't really know the answer.
I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop
Sorry.
with this, but they call to mind probably the most famous rock in North-South Lake, and that would be Alligator Rock, which since the earliest written records we have of it, people have been picking up rocks and creating teeth in this split rock to create teeth. And I know that you mentioned that with one of them. It is certainly one other thing. And all this sounds like I'm challenging what you're saying. I'm not. I mean, certainly, as I said, Native American people would have left marks, and we just might have trouble recognizing them. That's certainly understandable. But there was a book written by what's her name? Woman from Saugerties, who wrote a book called back in the 1800s called The Land of Rip Van Winkle. Amy A.E. Okay, her name will come to me. But in that, she says, she creates a conversation between people, and they were complaining about European settlers, European tourists, who will look at a great landscape, look at a beautiful sunset, and all they want to really see is a rock that looks like a loaf of bread, or just so. I mean, we see these things, we see faces. And that would be true of Native Americans, of tourists. It's something that people would do, and I don't think the difference between some European doing something like that and a Native American doing something like that is really something to question. I think that certainly is possible and likely.
Well, it's been fascinating, and I think it's what is it, it's almost 9:15, so it's a late evening, and we could probably go on for longer, but if I may, am I sort of call the proceedings to close?
Well,
yes,
30 seconds.
Evan, one final thought.
30 seconds to respond to that insightful comment. As on Thursday at 7, I'm giving a talk at the LT Memorial Library about another kind of recognized image. It ties in perfectly what he's saying, in that the natives saw a face of a chief in the backside of Halt's Point, which is, we call the skytop, in the backside. And there's a whole story that evolved out of recognizing that face as being not only Jesus' face, but the face of God, the Creator, and that became the Misingwe tradition. So there's all these various stories, and this one is documented by Frank Speck himself, and from a great chief in 1931 telling the story. So it's hard to, when you can get those oral, gems saying, "Oh, that's what we meant." There are not too many of them, but when they are, it helps understand the whole bigger picture. So what you're saying is exactly true.
Great.
So that's my closing statement.
Well, very good. Excellent. Thank you very much,
Yes.
Evan. Been fascinating presentation, and we're delighted to have been, that this was possible, to have you join us and to make your presentation. And so I thank you very much. And I'll be sending something in the mail to you.
Hey,
But anyway,
okay.
I'd like to thank everyone.
Not a rock.
Yeah, not a rock. And we look forward to seeing you in 2025. So on behalf of the Mountaintop Historical Society, I bid everyone a good night. And Leslie Ruckman says, thank you, Evan, and everyone. Let's see, where is it? This was great. So yeah, I agree. And I think a lot of people do. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. All right. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Okay, good night.